to the Appalachian Shed. Today I'm going to talk about layout tools that we use in the construction industry. The pencil. That is the number one thing that you should have on you at all times. I like using a number 2 pencil like this so that I can get a nice conical point on it. That way that I can keep it sharp, I can make nice fine lines with it. And whenever I use it, I want to make sure that I turn the pencil as I'm drawing the line. That way I keep the tip of it perfectly sharp throughout the entire process. The construction pencil is, well, to say the least, it is used for construction purposes in the rough framing. So, you know, for marking a 2x4 or something like that, it's great. But for trying to do plywood work or trying to do cabinets or something like that, it's probably not the most sought after pencil because it has a very wide tip on it. There are special sharpeners that you can use that will get these nice and sharp, but I like using just a razor knife and sharpening it up. And then I will take a piece of sandpaper and I can rub it back and forth on this to get it very nice and sharp so that I can make a small line. A small line is very important when you're cutting anything, because a wide line you got all kinds of room to kind of mess up, but with a fine line you're really down to bare nuts there. You can also get it in a red color, and I think you can get it in a couple other colors. I just prefer the regular old lead pencil when I'm doing rough carpentry, and then I use my number 2 pencil when I'm trying to do cabinetry. Also, pens work okay. The ballpoint pen will work okay. It doesn't draw very well on pressure treated lumber. So it's okay, but if you're going to use a pen, use a gel pen. The gel pen makes a very nice dark line, and it's easily seen and easily to follow with your saws. The good old Sharpie. The good old Sharpie is going to leave a line that's going to be there forever. So make sure you use this very cautiously. Once it's there, it don't come off at all. So don't use this on your finished stuff. You can mark rough lumber, and I actually use these when I lay out my studs on a house. That way I can actually, you know, make an X or a C for a cripple or an H for a header, so forth, and those work really nice for me. In the old days, before we had pencils, an awl was used. So an awl is just a piece of metal that has a very nice sharp point on it that you can use to scratch your wood. But remember that if you're using an awl, you can't erase this very easily. X-Acto knives and utility knives also work great, but again, you can't erase these if you make a mistake. This is a chisel that I have sharpened in a different way that gives me kind of a knife point on it, and I can use it to make marks as well. And it works very nice for me. I can just lay it up there, pull it down, and it makes a nice line that I can follow when I'm sawing by it. When I'm trying to draw circles, I might use a compass. And this compass is a very small compass, and it does really nice to draw small circles. Sometimes I want to draw bigger circles, and basically I just took a pair of dividers and I taped me a pencil on there, and I can make very large circles with it. They both work very nicely. With this one, obviously, I can take the pencil off and run it through a pencil sharpener. With this one, it just takes a piece of lead, and the only way to sharpen that is, again, with the sandpaper. Take the sandpaper and just rub it across through there, and that will give you a nice sharp point on it so that you can get a nice fine line. If I'm trying to find the center of something, I might use a center punch. A center punch is a piece of steel that has it's a hardened piece of steel actually that has a very conical point on it, and it is used to find centers for drills, for screws, any sort of thing where you might need a center. This little center punch is really pretty cool. It is actually made to go onto a hinge. So when you have a hinge, you stick it in the hole of the hinge, hit it with your hammer, and it just makes a nice little hole perfectly in the center where that screw is going to go. The next most important layout tool is going to be a tape rule. And obviously there's tons of different choices to pick from. My particular favorite is this one. It's fairly thin. It has very nice clear markings on it. It has a nice lock on it. And I can put it in my pouch, my nail pouch, very easily and get it out. I know a lot of people like the big Fat Max. This may not be a Fat Max, but it's a very inexpensive copy. But they're wider. They have a wider blade than the conventional. And you can see the difference here. And you can actually get smaller ones. And you can get even smaller. These smaller ones have really no place in the construction world. Maybe in the cabinet building world, but not really. They don't have everything you need. This one here only goes to about 10 feet. And it's kind of cheaply made too. This one, however, is very old, and it is made by Lufkin. You ever heard of that name? Lufkin. Okay, this was probably 35 years old. This one's fairly new. But this Lufkin was made very nice, but it's only 8 foot long, and it's seen its better days, and it doesn't have everything that the regular construction tape has. And this is, let me explain to you what I mean by that. The construction rule gives you inches, and they give you fractions of an inch. Most are broken down into 1/16 of an inch. They also give you 1 foot and inches, as well as they continue the inches on out. Even when we get out very, very far, we can still say 3 foot 3 inches or 39 inches. One of the other remarkable things that these tapes give is they mark out every foot with a black arrow and every 16 inches with a red mark. But what I really like is this little diamond. That diamond is for 19.2. So if we took a piece of 8 foot long plywood and we divided it by 5 times, we would end up with 19.2 inches. What I don't like are these easy to read tapes and self-centering tapes. They can also be kind of confusing sometimes. So an easy read tape is like what my wife might want to use. But in this, it has all of the increments already told to you throughout the entire tape. It still gives you the same amount of information as everything else, even the 19.2, but this can get very confusing. Let's say that you're trying to teach your kid how to read an analog clock. If it tells you what time it is, the child's never going to learn to read it. So take time to learn this before you get into the construction field. The self-centering gives you on the top, it gives you the standards written all out for you, but underneath it, it breaks it down into half of it. In other words, we have 6 inches and half of that is 3. So that is self-centering. We know that we go back to the 3, make a mark. If we get out here to something like 27 inches, we can look right below it and see 13.5 or 13.5 inches. That way we know that 13.5 is half of 27. This one is only in inches and doesn't give us feet at all. Whenever you're using these tools, don't let them slap back like that. That's not very good. What's going to happen is you're going to do that one day and this little tip's going to fly off of there. These tips have several different rivets that are holding these on there. If they're really good, they're going to have 3. But some of the cheaper ones, they're not going to have but 2. Also, take care of that tip. See what's happened to this one? Not cool. Sometimes you can get these tips with magnetic ends on them. And that's okay if you're working in metal. But if you put that thing in your mail pocket, you're going to pull it out, it's going to be full of all kinds of screws and nails and everything. And then when you try to hook it to something, you might find out that you've got a screw there and you've actually cut it too short. When I do break a tape, I save it. I don't throw it in the trash can. And I cut it about every foot or so. Sometimes I cut them a little longer. But because they have the feet and inches on there, I still have 1 through 12 up on the top. And I can still utilize these. These are great if you want to just use it on the table. You don't have a big old bulky tape that you have to put up with. I actually took one and glued it to my table saw so that I can use it when I'm setting my rip fence on it. It works really great. So never get rid of these. These are always pretty handy to use. Another type of rule is a folding rule. Obviously, it's called a zigzag rule. So the folding rule is much like the other tapes, except they're generally made of wood. Don't let your children get a hold of them. They want to pull them out like this and they will break. And then they have the same readings on them, generally broken down into 1/16 of an inch. 1/16 of an inch is about the smallest that we work to in construction. I have one somewhere, God knows where, that actually has a piece of brass on here that will slide out so that I can do an inside measurement very easily on this. Speaking of inside measurements, on your tapes, if you'll turn it over on the back and look at it, you will notice that it says how big the case is. And in this case, it's 3 inches. So if I'm doing an inside measurement, for instance, I can put my tape up here and I can lock it down. And whenever I read right here, all I need to do is add 3 inches to it and it works really great. Some tapes are kind of odd. This is 3 inches. This is 3 3/8 of an inch. So you can imagine, if you're trying to take a measurement that is not exactly a perfect inch, and you try to add 3 3/8 inches in your head, it might be a little confusing. Other rules I like to use when I'm working up close or maybe reading off of a print or something is an architectural scale. The architectural scale is broken down into very different types of scales, different sizes. You have the full scale, but then you'll have other scales on there as well. A 1/4 inch scale is probably the most used scale in all drawings. You can also get a flat scale in an architectural scale that has just a few of the basic scales that are needed when reading blueprints. Now you might think a micrometer wouldn't have a place in construction. More like in metalwork, in precision metalwork. But I like to use these, especially when I'm planing my lumber, so that way I can really get down to the nitty-gritty here and I know exactly what size the piece of wood is, what thickness it is, so that they can all be the same. I also can have an inside measurement here. Say for instance I needed to measure the inside of this, then I just stick that in there and measure it. But what I really like about it is this little piece here. So I can actually measure the distance or the depth of a hole by this. All I do is stick that down in there, pull this down to it, and then I can read that because this distance and that distance is all the same. This one is a plastic one. If it breaks, I'm not out of a whole lot of money. This one I can pull up onto the job site and use, but this one I don't. This one stays at home. This one is a very nice one, and I use it in the shop only. It also stays in a case, very protected. Now let's talk about squares. This is probably one of the oldest type squares that I have. This is a tri-square, and it's used when we're planing wood And we would take this and we would hold it up to the light to see if we have any light shining onto it to make sure that it's not one way or the other. Therefore, we are trying the wood. Tri-square. This is a combination square. A combination square will do us 90 degrees. It will do a 45 degree. It has a nice little level on there, but I wouldn't trust it very much. And most of them have a little scribe on the rear end of it if you haven't already lost it. These are pretty nice to have, but one thing I really stress to everybody that I know, do not, and I repeat, do not take this off because it's a pain to get back on. You can move it back and forth very easily, then tighten this here and it locks it in place. You can also use this to mark out along the wood for a rip cut. But whatever you do, don't take this off from that. What is this? If you said a triangle, you're correct. If you said it's a speed square is a brand name. A triangle, or a speed square if you want to call it, is very useful to have with you in construction. It gives you inches along the one side, broken into eighths of an inch. It gives you a nice T-bar so you can slap it up against something and have a nice straight 90-degree angle. On the other side, you have a 45-degree angle. You can also tilt this and use either the common rafter scale, you can use the Hip Valley rafter scale, and you can also use in degrees as well. This rafter square also has some little notches in it so that you can set your pin in there and you can run through and also do a rip line on your boards. This one is exactly like its smaller cousin, except all of these are just bigger. It has a few more scales on it that you can use, but for all intents and purposes, it does exactly the same thing that the smaller one does. The framing square is an invaluable tool when laying out rafters. The framing square is made up of a tongue and a blade. The blade is 24 inches long, 2 inches wide. The tongue is 1.5 inches wide and 16 inches long. These are laid off in 16-inch fractions on one side, eighths on another, and if you turn it over, you'll find out that it's broken down into twelfths and tenths as well. You can find these in various sizes, from the very small one, where the blade is 1.5 inches wide and 12 inches long, and the tongue is 1 inch wide and only 8 inches long. Or you can get a big bad boy where the tongue and the body both are 2 inches wide, but the tongue is 24 inches long and the body is 48 inches long. What if you need to do an angle that is not exactly square or 45? With the triangle, you can read these with the degrees on one side. You can use sliding T-bevels, such as this, where you can set this angle and you can copy it again and again and again. They come in all different shapes and sizes, wood and plastic. You can find angle finders. This particular angle finder, I like using it because it gives me what the angle is between here and here, and it also gives me the angle from here to here. Another little device here is a protractor. This one is kind of a little freaky here because it can be used in different ways in construction. I can also use just regular drafting triangles where I have 45-90 and 30-60-90. Now, what if I have something that is just completely berserk and I can't figure out how to copy it? We have something called a profiler. Profilers are really nice. Pretty simple, right? What if we had something a little bit more, well, a little harder to try to copy? Like the head of this hammer. Isn't that pretty cool? So that way we can cut our piece, we can lay it down and trace it out, cut it, and then it's going to fit right on there just perfectly. This is a profiler. And you can get it in different sizes, from small to very, very large. You have different types of cuts that you have to do, so tile or hardwood flooring. These are really great to profile around some of the moldings that you might come in contact with. What if I have to make a very long line to cut? Well, then I use a chalk line. A chalk line is filled full of different colored chalk, and I'm just about out, but you can see that there's a little bit of a blue in there. And these work really great to give us a straight line at a very long distance, such as across the house, down an entire length of a board, whatever may be needed. This is a string and it can be pulled very, very tight and very straight. One thing to be said about these, don't let it get wet. If the chalk in here gets wet, it's going to solidify and you're going to have a heck of a time trying to get it cleaned out. The string is going to have to be replaced. The chalk is going to have to be replaced. You basically just have to take the whole thing apart, clean it out, and then put new chalk and new string in there. Well, I'm sure that I haven't covered everything that's out there on the market today, but I hope that I have covered enough to kind of help you get started and get an idea as to what you might need when you're starting construction. Thanks, guys. I'll talk to you later. Say whatever you want, I can cut it out.
Ah, boo!
My beautiful wife is going to be filming for me tonight. Well, I can sign if I want to. It's my class. Seriously? It's got brand new batteries in it. That'll be fine.
Okay, go.
Use a gel pen. The gel pen makes a very nice dark point on it and finished stuff, but you can mark rough lumber and you can mark rough lumber. I'll cut that out. If I'm trying to draw a circle, I might be using a compass. When I'm trying to draw circles, I might use a compass. And this compass is a very small compass. It's this little diamond. That little diamond is 19.2. Where does it need to be? Do I need to start again? Okay. So the construction tape, you know, it gives you in inches. Hell.
Okay.
Hold it. Sprinkles! I can trim it. Whenever you're using these tools, don't let them slap back. That is just not cool whatsoever. Whenever you're using these, have several different tips. Gunner, hush! And if nothing else, you can always make yourself a nice little bracelet, except it doesn't work all the time. Or it's called a zigzag tape. Or it's called a zigzag rule. By looking up at the light to see if we see any light in it. And it has a nice, you can use the decimal, or you can use the common rafter. You can use the common rafter scale. You can use the Hip Valley rafter square. You can use the common rafter scale. This is a framing square. A framing square is a framing square. This is a framing square. The framing square is cuts that you have to do, such as tile or woodworking, or if you have different. I'm sure that I haven't. I just thought about something. I'll talk to you later.